Summer's coming. Well, it is here actually, so it's going to be a great summer. All right. Pastor Finn is away as well. Pray for him. Has a family reunion in Florida, so hope he gets much deserved rest. I want to talk about prayer today. Two types of prayers: fast and slow prayers. Like, what does that really mean? Let me explain it this way. Before we talk about prayer, I want to give you a quick biology lesson. Some of you, you don't know, but I graduated with a biology degree, and I did nothing with it. So this is one of the few times I'm going to use my biology knowledge. Actually, I forgot all this. I just Googled it. Every one of us, we have muscles, yay! And there are two types of muscle fibers: slow twitch and a fast twitch muscle fiber. Slow twitch first is very red, right? It's high there's a lot of mitochondria, which is the energy producing organelles or mechanism, right? There's a lot of capillaries, so it could deliver the oxygen, so it can create that energy, and myoglobin, which is the protein that carries oxygen. All that is to say so that you can have a lot of energy for the long term of whatever endurance things you're doing. On the other hand, the fast twitch muscles, there aren't too many mitochondria, but they have a lot of enzyme, and it's needed for high energy production when you need it. So those two muscle fibers are important. Not only for everyday life, but for athletes. So let me talk about running. I like running. And two of my heroes, Usain Bolt. I don't know what you're for the Olympics, but fastest man alive, right? 5.8 seconds, meters, that's pretty fast. And of course, he uses all fast twitch muscles. I mean, that dude's fast. The other part is Eliud Kipchoge, the Kenyan, the fastest marathoner. He doesn't hold the record anymore, but he actually ran our marathon, which is supposedly humanly possible. This is, by the way, as a story behind it, but he actually ran a marathon of 1 hour and 59 minutes. This guy obviously uses the slow twitch muscles. It's kind of fast as well. And I was kind of like, is there a way where Eliud Kipchoge could run Usain Bolt's pace and do a full marathon? Now, humanly, it's just impossible. Biology won't allow it. But I did kind of wonder. I don't know how to do the math, so I asked Miss AI, what is the time if Eliud Kipchoge could run a marathon at Usain's pace? You guys could probably figure that. I did it for you. He would run a marathon in 1 hour and 7 minutes and 22 seconds. Crazy. like that is absurd. Last week, if you follow, there's another woman by the name of Faith Guy. She attempted to break the 4-minute mile barrier. The only woman to do that. She actually ran it in 4 minutes and 6 seconds. So kudos to her. But it's getting there. People are getting faster and faster. So there are athletes who use fast twitch and slow twitch, and all those things are important, whatever physical discipline that you are going with, all right? And here is kind of the correlations of where we're going. Fast twitch muscles, that mode, like Eliud Kipchoge, you can't sustain that kind of pace. Our biology won't let us do that. And even in life, there are a lot of high-performing people who actually live on, quote, fast twitch kind of way. They live, they intuitively, everything's fast-paced. And maybe some of you, or a lot of people, especially in New York, who live this way, and you know that kind of fast-paced lifestyle, no rest, just constantly on the go, you can't sustain it. It's not only going to lead you to exhaustion, but you're going to burn out. There's cortisol, these hormones going to get into your bloodstream, and it's just going to lead you to some horrible things. Heart diseases, immune suppression, anxiety, depression, and health-related issues. It's just humanly unsustainable to be living at that kind of a mode. And that's why God created our bodies, and there are biological limits to these kinds of things. That's why the fastest marathoner will be Eliud Kipchoge for now. Somebody actually might beat under 2 hours. But that's it for now. And there's a reason for that, because we can't live in that fast-paced way. So now the question is, after this biology lesson, how does this biology lesson relate to prayer? Because that's our focus today. And so what I want to say is that there are two types of prayers. There's fast-paced prayer, and there's also slow-paced prayers. And in a sense, we need both. Just like sprinters who use fast-twitch muscle fibers, there are fast-paced prayers that are potent and powerful. And we need to use those kind of prayers as well. However, they're to be used sparingly. You know, the second song we sang, Waymaker. Oh, man. God is our waymaker. He's powerful. The way he comes into your life, he makes a way when there is no other way. And when he answers prayer, it's like amazing, right? Now, that's great stuff. And those are like fast prayer, and they're urgent prayers that often comes. And when God comes and meets your prayers when there is no other way, man, that's powerful. But here's the thing about fast prayers. They're not the norm in the Bible. It's almost like used as needed. For example, so you know the Apostle Paul, well, at the time it was Paul or Peter. No, did I say Paul? Forget Paul. Peter, as he's learning to be a disciple, this spontaneous guy, there's a lot of things about Peter, but one incident that you know about Peter is that they were on a boat going to the other side in the Sea of Galilee. It was the middle of the night, and Jesus wasn't there, and all of a sudden the storm starts coming. Remember that scenario? And here's a little picture of that. And the disciples in the boat got scared. And then lo and behold, there's a ghostly figure that comes across the river, and lo and behold, that's Jesus. And Peter said, Jesus, that's you, come tell me, ask me to come to you, and I'll walk on water. And sure enough, he came out of the boat, started walking. And as he's walking, if he had his phone, he'll probably take a selfie and say, look what's going on. But then he realized, oh my gosh, I'm walking on water. How is that possible? And then he saw the winds and the waves crashing at him, and he's like, this is not real. And then he starts drowning. And you know what Peter said right here? He uttered one fast prayer that was urgent and immediate at that time. He said, Lord, save me. And guess what Jesus did? He pulled out his hand and he saved him. Wow. It's effective. Fast prayers are important, especially if it's immediate. If you're going to die, live or die, right? If God is predicated upon your life, you're going to have to pray like that. And guess what? It's effective. However, what you have to learn is that kind of prayer is not normative. It's not that's not our prayer life. And here's the thing, what if our prayer life was exclusively fast-paced? What if our prayer life is only when we get on our knees when there are urgent prayers? And gosh, we have a lot of urgent prayers around us, and I get that. There are a lot of immediate concerns, and do we got to drop everything? Intercede. If you're on the highway, just pull over. You pray for whoever is needing prayer, and we do that in our church, and that's important. And we ought to continue that. But what if that is the only time we pray? If our prayer life is only fast-paced, then the effectiveness and the power of prayer, what happens is it doesn't usually go in the long run. And that's what I'm going to show you today. You can't, just like Eliud Kipchoge, cannot do a pace like that. You can only do a couple miles. You just can't sustain it. Biologically, it's not sustainable. Spiritually, it's not sustainable either. And this is what we see in our text today. So we looked at our text, and here's that situation, all right? The main story is about the father who has a demon-possessed son, and he wants to get his son healed. But then in the context of Mark chapter 9, you see the great crowd. You see the disciples, you see the scribes, and then again the Father, Son, and later on Jesus comes in. What's going on? First of all, look at the people in the crowd. And what were they doing? Why were they following Jesus? They wanted some fast prayers because this is what they've seen before. And in fact, they know about the situation. There's a demon-possessed son. They want to see the son get freed. And I'm sure people in the crowd also, they wanted some fast prayers too because they had diseases and it's incurable. They wanted Jesus to cure them. Some were blind. They wanted to see. Others were paralyzed. They wanted to walk. So you understand that, right? Especially those who have leprosy. They want to be clean again. And they're asking for that. They're looking for Jesus for fast prayers. And I don't blame them. And if you and I were in that crowd, we should not blame them either because we would want the same thing. You know why? Because this is the same crowd that actually witnessed Jesus do these types of powerful, amazing acts and prayers. Previously, if you look at a few chapters back in Mark chapter 6, what you find is that Jesus actually, remember, he sent the 12. He says, go out 2 by 2. And this is what he said. And he called the 12, and he began to send them 2 by 2 and gave them authority over unclean spirits they cast out many demons, all right? And they also anointed with oil many who were sick and healed them. Amazing things were going on. Not only was Jesus doing this, but the disciples were doing this. And the crowd, you see, they understood all that and they were recipients of it and they wanted more. And in our text, what we see is that that's the background of chapter 9 of Mark. And then you see the Father and Son. They were at the front and center and asking the disciples, this is my situation. Can you do this? Can you heal my son? And in the meanwhile, Mark tells us there were the scribes, the religious leaders, the professionals, and they were debating with the disciples and said, you can't do this. What authority do you have? You're just a sinner. They're going back and forth and all that. And disciples are like, don't worry about it. I got this. We've done this before, not too long ago. Mark chapter, by the way. And Jesus gave me the anointing, and we could do this. And guess what the disciples, they did it, prayed. But here's the problem. No power. No answered prayer. No manifestation of God. Not like before. It's like, what happened? So maybe you muster more energy. I don't know what you do. And then you pray again. Nothing's happening. The boy's still demon-possessed. And then in the scene, what you find is Jesus comes in. And Jesus looks at the situation. And he says, looks to the boy and the demon, says, you mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. Waymaker. Amazing, right? It happened. And the demon just left, and it was as if the boy was dead, and they were all concerned, but Jesus says, come. That's fast prayer, man. Wow. That is manifestation of God's power. All glory goes to him. Now, after showing you what happened, there should be a question in your mind, and here's your question. I'm going to read your mind, and you're asking, now why did Jesus' prayer work, and why didn't the disciples' prayer work, right? Of course you're asking that, because that's the situation, right? Why is it that? And if we're in a Bible study, you'll get some answers, and yours will be, Jesus, he's a holy man. He is endowed with special power. He is favored by God. And you'll find out later on that he's the Son of God. And I'm telling you, none of that stuff is wrong. That's all true. However, if that is the answer, it's not going to be helpful for you and me. You know why? Because most of the if to have effective, powerful prayer, we don't have hope. You know why? Because none of us really will attain the status of sainthood. None of us will ever be holy enough. None of us will ever be endowed with that kind of spiritual power. And none of us will be attaining the aspirations of being a son or daughter of God in the state of the way Jesus as Son of God is. We'll never do that or be that way. and is not going to help us if that is the explanation of why Jesus' prayers worked and the disciples' prayers didn't, and by virtue, us. Like why can't our prayers be like that? And it's not because of our special status. And in fact, the disciples actually asked the same thing. Because after that incident happened, they pulled Jesus to the side and they asked that similar question. Why couldn't we cast it out? Okay, why couldn't we cast it out? That's what the disciples were asking. And Jesus actually answered it. And I want you to get this answer. First of all, in Mark's account, Jesus answered, "This kind cannot be driven out by anything but by prayer." And in some translation, parentheses, it says fasting. Okay, so you need to pray. It just doesn't happen. Maybe you need to fast as well. The Gospel of Luke, Luke writer adds a further explanation. In verse 21, Luke says, this is the same account that happened. And then Luke says, Jesus answered, and here's Jesus' explanation. "O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you and bear with you? Bring your son to me." And Jesus healed the son. Now, Matthew comes along, and he elaborates on what he said, and he tells the answer. And in the mouth of Jesus, Matthew says, he said to them, "Because of your little faith." And that's your answer right there. "Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. And nothing will be impossible for you." So according to Jesus, the reason why his faith worked and the disciples' prayer didn't work is not spiritual status with God, okay? But it was the difference in faith. Get that? That's the difference. Not because he's the Son of God or he's more special, and which is all true, but it's the level of faith. Another way to describe this is that fast-paced prayer, which are powerful, which are needed almost every day, cannot sustain a prayer life that requires deep faith without being connected with God. Because if the faith is not there, we're connected to God, it's not going to be effective and powerful at all. So that is fast-paced prayer. And that's the difference between Jesus and us. So here's what Jesus is really teaching. If we want to pray, and he calls all of us, especially followers of Jesus, disciples ask, "I see you praying, Jesus, teach us how to pray," and we get the Lord's Prayer. But that's just an outline for this, which is slow-paced prayer. This is what Jesus is teaching the church and us, how to pray. What is slow-paced prayer? In the same way that we saw developing slow twitch muscles are essential to running long distances and marathons and all that kind of endurance stuff. Developing slow-paced prayers are also essential in praying effectively according to God's will. If there's anything to take away, this is really the essence of the message. This is my point here. A lifelong discipline of slow-paced prayers, which I'm going to explain later, that is the basis for the fast prayers that we need to do once in a while that will be powerful and effective. It is the slow-paced prayer, but it's a lifelong discipline, slow pace, so that when it's ready, then prayers will be powerful. Now, Jesus explained that developing the slow-paced prayer, you got to have both. You got to have prayer. You got to pray. And you got to learn how to pray. But it has to be accompanied with faith. And that's what Jesus taught. Disciples had prayer, but their faith was waning. It wasn't developed. But Jesus had prayer and faith. And prayer and faith in slow-paced prayer, they're inextricably linked. You cannot have one without the other. While the disciples exercised primarily sprint prayers, because this is the early part of their discipleship. They were just learning to be disciples of Jesus, and they were learning this stuff. And they probably didn't have a tremendous and robust prayer life, so they only knew how to pray when needed. And so that's all that they knew. They had sprint prayers. While the disciples had that, I want you to think about Jesus. He had been working on long, slow prayers all his life. I want you to think about this. By this time, he came in public for 33 years. What was Jesus doing? He was training. He was doing slow prayers. Like we know about him coming as a baby. We know when he was at 12 years old. We don't know anything about him until throughout young adult. And at age 30, we see him coming. But what did he do in between those times? You have to surmise. He was living life. He was learning how to be he was a boy, he was a teenager, and then he was a young adult, finding his craft, being a carpenter. He was living life, hanging out with his friends. But what was he doing? He was developing. He was learning to pray. He was developing a prayer life. And he kept learning how to pray. Remember, even at the age of 12, we find him at the temple, and he was learning about God. And that's why Luke says that Jesus grew up in wisdom and in stature in favor with God and with man. Because he was learning and growing. And even in prayer, not only was he praying, but he was learning and was connecting with the Father. He had intimacy with him. And that faith in his Father, in God, and theology kept growing. And so therefore, his prayer was also growing, and his power and his effectiveness. To understand this, you know the definition of faith. Like, how do you get faith? And Hebrews says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. There's a theologian, Dallas Willard. He essentially, to cut to the chase, is really long explanation, but he says, he actually, see, if our faith is going to equal prayer to the extent the way Jesus prayed, faith cannot be subjective. According to Dallas Willard, faith has to be an objective faith. So he translates faith this way. Faith is not, it is an actual substance, something objective, something that you hope for. And it is the evidence or the proof of things not seen. It's not like I hope to see have faith one day. It's not subjective. It is based in reality. So here's my summation of what Dallas Willard is saying. For Willard, faith is the evidence of things that you don't see. So therefore, faith is not opposed to sight. Faith is opposed to sight because you can't see it, but it's not opposed to knowledge. In other words, what is your substance that is grounded in faith? Is the knowledge of God. So the more you know God, the more you dive into the Bible, the more you understand theology, the more you go deep into the things of God, your knowledge increases. And if your knowledge of God increases, guys, you don't have to try to believe in God. Your faith will proportionally grow up. And the more, that's why, according to Willard, faith is an actual substance. Knowledge is fact. Knowledge is something you could hold on to. If you know something about God, that is actual substance that's going to grow your faith, not emotionally or subjectively, but in knowledge. And the more you know about God, the more your faith grows. And guess what? Then your prayer, when you start praying, it's not like, I hope this works, but it will also increase in power and effectiveness. But guess what? This is lifelong discipline. You can't just for one season learn everything about God and then you have a powerful prayer life. No. It is a day-by-day spiritual formation, day in and day out type of relationship. So because Jesus knew God, and he kept growing in the knowledge of God, Jesus' faith kept growing so that when Jesus came on the scene after the baptism and he tells the wind to hush, it hushed. That's the southern interpretation. When it tells this demon to get out of here, it goes. When he says anything, it happens. You know why? Yes, he's Son of God, he's poverty. But what he's trying to teach us, because he was also human, and he's teaching the disciples, and he's teaching us, you gotta have faith. He believed this stuff because he knows the Father. As in the reality, as you see me and I see you, Jesus saw the Father like clear as day. That's why he was able to pray amazing, impossible things. That's why he is our way maker. Now, if that is true, if that's how we're supposed to pray, here's a challenge. Jesus is calling the church and us to be a person of prayer. Not a person who prays. Big difference. A person of prayer versus a person who prays. A person who prays gets activated when there's an urgent prayer request. And those are good, important things. And it's not just exclusive Christianity. All religions pray, right? But here's the thing. When we get these prayer requests, man, you got to stop everything and you intercede. Fast prayers, that's important. Just because you pray, however, doesn't make you a person of prayer. A person of prayer, however, learns not just the techniques of prayer and the spiritual rhythms and formation and so forth. Those are important. A person of prayer learns about the Father, about God, about who he is, goes deep into theology. A person of prayer commits to this slow-paced prayer life that it becomes part of you for today, tomorrow, for years, for decades, until you die. You become a person of prayer. It doesn't stop. It never stops. Even when you don't feel like praying, you still pray. If you would indulge me, I'm going to use running analogy, all right? This is so important because it really matches, all right? So I've been meaning to give this analogy. All right, when it comes to running, a lot of people say, well, how can you run a marathon? I want to run that far, but I just can't. And a lot of people just think about running 26 miles or more, and you're like, no, there's just no way. I can't even run to the post office. I'm done. So they stop right away, and they don't even try. And so they stop. But there's others who say, well, at least I'll try. So what they do is they muster up motivation and they watch a lot of videos. And so what they do is they go to the store and they buy those super shoes. You know what those super shoes are? They have carbon plating. They weigh less than 7 ounces. They'll set you back about $300. You're like, with these shoes, oh man, I'm gonna fly. And so you put them on, it makes you feel fast. And then you come to the track with a running group and you say, all right, let's do this. And then you run your heart out. For 5 minutes, you're going, and then you get tired, and you say, okay, I'm done. I tried. It is not possible. No marathon for me. It's just absolutely too painful. If God is calling us to be people of prayer, or person of prayer, it's like we hear, it's like this. It's like you hear, and I hear about spiritual prayer warriors who pray for like hours. Pastors who pray 5 hours a day, like Pastor Finn. And I'm like, I can't be like him. I'm too busy. My attention span is, really short. And you're like, I can't do it. So you stop, like the first scenario. Like, I can't do it. Only Pastor Finn could do this. And then, but you say, well, I'm going to try, all right? And others of you say, well, I have to learn how to pray. God is calling me to pray. So I want to be a person of prayer. So you try. So you try for an hour. And it was hard, but you did it. You slept for 30 minutes of it, but still, you finished. You're like, I can't believe I did that. You're like, yay, I did 1 hour, but does that turn you into a person of prayer? It all depends. Have you tried that again? If it was like 5 years ago, you tried it once, that doesn't mean you're a person of prayer. It's just like, at least you tried, and you're like, but it's hard. It's hard. Those are the analogies, but here, listen to this. How do you then go from, if you really, going back to the running analogy again, if you want to really take this seriously and run a marathon, for instance. You don't have to, but for instance. How do you really do that? In those first two scenarios, that's never going to help you. What you do is you need to gain knowledge. What do you have to know? You have to know that you're going to have to commit to this discipline, and you're going to put all your heart into it. And in fact, that's what elite athletes do. The reason why you see Usain Bolt and Eliud Kipchoge and all these elite athletes in their sports, like at the top of their field, is because there are, and I hope you know this, there are countless number of hours they have committed to their field, whether on the track, in the gym, in the pool, riding a bike, whatever. They're constantly there. Oftentimes before sunrise, not just today, tomorrow, but month and year after year, they're constantly pushing themselves when nobody's watching. They're training. They're on strict diet. They're doing whatever. They're doing things that no one sees them training for. That is required to peak at this elite level. I hope you heard this phrase before. Success is 1% inspiration, 99% what? Perspiration. That's a lot of work. That's why they can perform at that level. So here's the thing. How do you go from being a person who prays to be a person of prayer? It's the same thing. You got to gain knowledge. You got to know that to be a person of prayer, you got to have faith. Not because you're spiritual, not because you have a gift of prayer, You got to have knowledge. Not only that, I say here, you got to also be honest. Because honesty is the fact that the reason why you're not a person of prayer, and I'm speaking to myself, by the way, is because I don't have that faith. I don't believe, the things, like there's a lot of things that God says to do, and it's just like the Father's prayer. I believe, but help my unbelief. Like you got to be honest. Like, can I really do this? Like, can I really believe that God can do all things? You got to be honest with yourself. Then once that happens, then let the Holy Spirit convict you of that. Because if you want to be a person of prayer so that you could look spiritual, next year you're not going to pray like that anymore. It's just like it's only for a season. Seasonal prayer might be good, just like Lent, but that doesn't mean you're a person of prayer. That's just when, just when you do it once in a while. But a person of prayer, he has to be convicted by the Holy Spirit that it is God who wakes you up at 5 a.m. It's God who burdens you to go deeper in prayer when you don't want to, or even when you don't have time. You see, the Holy Spirit has to move you to be the motivator. Otherwise, you're going to quit. You're not going to persist. It's not going to be a lifestyle. Another thing you got to do to be a person of prayer, you got to have a plan, a daily plan. Don't start with 1 hour. You could do it, but you're never going to do it again. Just like running, you got to do it slow. Do a 5-minute prayer. The next week, do 10-minute prayer and build up to half an hour to an hour and just build up as a daily lifestyle that can go on for months to years to decades for the rest of your life as a rhythm of prayer. Then finally, you got to have accountability. Even elite coaches, elite athletes, no matter how fast they are, they need coaches. And it helps them get better for accountability. And I believe this is what's missing for people of prayer, is that we need accountability. We have to do it together. That's going to keep us going. So, what is Jesus teaching us? He's teaching us to be a person of prayer. Let's go back to the scene. So how can people become people of prayer? How can you become a person of prayer? To the crowd, if we're part of the crowd, and they actually understand this message, what Jesus is teaching, would they move from being fast fast-paced prayer junkies to slow down and do a deep contemplative, slow roasting prayer and waiting for God, for you to be healed and have patience? Would you do that? Would the crowd do that? Most likely not, because the crowd always wants a show. We're part of that. It's called social media. I understand even a minute reel is too long. It has to be 30 seconds away. Everything has to be quick. It has to be on time, and God has to make a way right now, right? Otherwise, it's not going to get any play. So that's the crowd. And if we're in the crowd, it's not going to help us. But what about the scribes? Yes, they know a lot about God. They study about God. They're theologians, perhaps. Will learning about God, some of you are really head knowledge, you know a lot about God. Will they turn into slow-paced prayer warriors? Maybe, maybe not. For the scribes, they can pray. They have some sort of faith because they have head knowledge, but it does not necessarily translate to the heart. And when the faith of the heart is disconnected from the mind, then your prayer is mere academic, is very professional. And I'm a pastor. I'm a professional pastor, so I'm a professional prayer. If we have a civic thing, they call people like me, and we could do a prayer for the whole community, and we know the right words. That's professional prayer. But that's not necessarily the slow-paced prayer that Jesus is talking about. To the Father, go back to him again. I mean, think about the Father who's witnessed his Son. We don't know how many years he's been like that, but constantly hurting himself. The demon is burning himself. And I mean, it's just, as a dad, you look at your child always being hurt, and it just breaks your heart, right? And then Jesus comes to the Father. And I believe that the Father actually got it. I believe the Father moved from this fast-paced, heal my son at all costs right now, to a person who prays because, a person of prayer, because, like I said, his honest confession. He says, I believe, I want to believe, but I don't, but help my unbelief. What a powerful prayer. And God, I believe, used that, and I believe he will turn into a person of prayer because he's experienced the God in the flesh, just like the definition of Hebrews. He has experienced the proof that there is hope in the flesh of Jesus Christ. He's seen God, and he's seen the witness and the power, and so that transformed him into a person of prayer. Think about the son who left. He experienced God too. He experienced the demon coming up. What I love about the story is that, let's say his father turned into a person of prayer. He sees his dad waking up, of interceding when there is no urgency. And you see his father praying, deep, slow prayer, day in and day out, years and years. No doubt this son is going to turn into a person of prayer as well. Think about that. To the disciples who were fast-paced junkies, because that's all they knew. So don't blame them too much. They didn't know how to pray. They're learning. Did they move from being fast-paced prayer people to slow prayer people? Did they get that deep spiritual formation to know God and pray the way Jesus taught? Eventually, I believe they did, minus one, Judas. Because the rest of the disciples, they turned into be the pillars of the church. And these 12 little knuckleheads who actually finally wised up after the Holy Spirit, they changed the world. In one generation, they changed the world. Everyone got martyred except John. They eventually got it. So there's a lot of hope. I don't know where you are on this prayer scale. We all know we need to pray. We need to pray deeply. We need to pray when urgent prayer requests come up on our chat groups. We need to drop everything. We need to intercede. But that is from the basis of deep relationship and powerful prayers that you have with the Father. So that's where God is leading to. He's asking us, you individually, he's asking SCD as a church, will we be a church, not just the church who prays, but be a church of prayer? We need to. We just need to. And that is what we're really good at, praying. But I want to challenge us. Let's work this out. And it's not easy. It's going to take day by day. It takes a lot of work. And no one's going to see you praying. Whether in the morning, tuck away in the afternoon somewhere, take a walk in nighttime before you go to bed. No one's going to see you do this. But that's what's required, and that's what Jesus is calling us to do. So I am very hopeful and know that God will change us. That's how he's changing the church too, powerfully through this kind of prayer, all right?